So let's get this started. And first of all, good morning and welcome to the Teads yacht on a beautifully sunny, rather quiet day. I mean, it's sod's law that the one time the French are working is between 9 and 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. But I'm really delighted to be here to moderate this panel. My name's Mark. I'm the Chief Client Officer at Teads. And I've got some very, very distinguished guests today who will introduce themselves in a minute. I mean, the principles of marketing remain exactly the same as they were 20 years ago, which is about getting the right message at the right time to the right person in the right context. And we all make life incredibly complicated for what is something very, very simple. And what we're going to talk about today is a lot about all of those elements, but especially the last bit, the context, the attention, and the importance of not just putting stuff out there, but putting great stuff out there and putting stuff out there that not only do people see, but they actually take time to engage in, and that's where the power of attention changes everything. But with no further ado, I'd love to introduce my guests, so we'll go from left to right. Anna.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. My name is Anna Campbell. I am a global client president, and because we all have two jobs, I'm also managing director for my sins.
Hi everyone, I'm Karen Owen. I'm the Chief Growth Officer for Kraft Heinz for our European and Pacific markets.
Hi, I'm Les Binet. I'm a sort of effectiveness person. I've spent the last 40 years measuring the effectiveness of advertising, trying to understand what drives effectiveness and trying to improve it.
Hello, and I'm Mike Follett. I'm the CEO of Lumen Research. We're the attention technology company.
Brilliant. So welcome, everybody. And whilst you've come to listen to all of us, there's probably one person you've come to listen to a little bit more than the rest. And since he spent 40 years doing it, we need to at least give him a little bit of time to explain a little bit of the context and what you're probably most famous for, which is the long and the short of it, and what the key principles of that were for some in the room who may not be aware of it.
Okay, I'll sum up my life's work. So the idea behind the book, The Long and the Short of it, was to understand how advertising works over the short and the long term. And these two things work quite differently. If you want to get an immediate sales hit, then you need to target people close to the point of purchase. You need to hit them with relevant information, offers, messages. You need to facilitate the purchase by removing barriers, giving people a route to purchase with the minimum number of clicks. So that's kind of performance marketing, promotions, what I call sales activation. And that's great. It's very efficient if you do it right. It gives you a very quick and immediate payback. But the effects don't last. If you turn it off, it goes to zero almost immediately. The effects don't last and they don't build, and so it doesn't drive growth. The other way you can do things is to go much broader, reach out beyond the maybe 5% of people in the market right now to the other 95%. Those people aren't interested in what you have to say about your products and your prices and so on. So you need to charm them with creative, entertaining advertising, something that's interesting in its own right. And I mean, it's interesting, Mark, you use the word getting the right messages. Mostly it doesn't work through messaging. This is the world of brand advertising. Brand advertising primarily works not through transmitting messages, but through emotional conditioning, you might say. So it's about hooking people in with creative work, and Mike will say some stuff about that later. It's about creating feelings and then crucially using those feelings to build lasting memories which will influence behavior later on. That stuff has smaller effects in the short term, but it lasts much longer, and those effects build, and that turns out to be the main driver of growth and profit. But you need both together. So as Ritson said, it's not the most important word in the long and the short of it is and typically the balance needs to be something like 60% brand, 40% activation, but it varies.
Thanks. That's a good summary of 40 years in a few minutes. But Karen, from your perspective, you experienced this at first hand, so I'd love to hear a little bit about your story.
So a bit of context at Kraft Heinz. Say 10 years ago, Kraft Heinz was known as a financial company. Pretty much, I'm seeing Bram nodding. A lot of the marketing effort was reduced, as it were. And even a couple of years ago, the focus was very much on the short, as Les described. So very much, what is our activation? We want results here and now. And we'd really lost our way in terms of the longer term brand building and emotional connection with consumers. So what the team has done over the past 5 years, and I see Nina in the room, who was getting another gold award last night, is rebuilding that plan to emotionally connect with consumers and deliver in store. So we'd had many, many years of share decline, loss of penetration, but this year we have seen for the first time in years, with investment in the short and the long, with fantastic creative, a rebuild to share growth. And that's volume share growth and penetration. So huge shout out to the Kraft Heinz team.
And how did you manage to get away from this short-term drug into how do you build a longer, more sustainable drug brand? Sorry.
So a few ways. I think one very practical one, it comes from the top. We had a change in leadership, and with a CEO that really buys into brand, innovation, and consumer, and ensuring that we're always delivering value to the consumer. So that was number one. Number two, a recognition we were simply not investing enough behind the brands. If consumers don't see the brands, they're not going to think about the brands. So we needed an investment reset. But you can have an investment reset, but if the creative isn't strong, it's not going to work. So the last few years has been about a huge ramp up in creative quality, ready for then the investment to come behind it, and working with our media partners to make sure that whoever we're wanting to target, the consumer groups and the occasions we're wanting to target, we've got smart media plans in place to reach those groups. So, it's been that 3-step process.
Fantastic. And talking about media partners, I guess over to you, Anna. Dentsu,
We are the media partner.
You are the media partner. So, firstly, congratulations. But also in terms of the work that you've done together with Mike and Les as a sport in terms of the Great Brand Reset, etc. Maybe take the people.
Well, I think, it's really interesting to hear Karen talk, and it really is great to see the shift that Kraft Heinz are making. But I think that there is still this simple truth within the industry that we are still heavily focused on short-term and short-term results and, working out what click worked. And for us, the brand reset is essentially that mechanism through attention to ensure that the mechanism to make sure the short and the long both work as effectively as it can. So it's a groundbreaking study, the first of its kind. 40,000 people were involved, respondents across the UK and the US. We had 10 leading platforms, including yourself, obviously, but also including some linear TV. We worked with 20 clients across 9 categories. And the ambition really is we've been leading for years in attention and proving that you can measure it second by second and uncovering that not every impression counts. And now we can get to that point where we've got the currency, we've got the attention as the currency, and now we've got the ability to prove it in terms of business value. And so that helps us work with clients to make more informed decisions around investment and really, as I said, shift that conversation from what click work through to what is actually moving brand and business for clients.
Fantastic. So there were sort of 4 or 5 key things, I think, that came out of that. And I'm going to sort of go through each of those in detail. So the first one was about digital video delivers multi-year brand shifts. Yeah. Between, Mike, I don't know if you want to say anything on that. Or
what's interesting about this study is not just that we've measured attention, but we've measured memory and memorization and long-term brand impact of things. And so for years, Dentsu have understood the short-term impact of a second's worth of attention or 2 or 3. what we've done in this, working with Kantar, is to understand the long-term impact, how much attention you need, not just to drive a memory in the next week, but in the next month or the next year. And so the crucial word throughout all of this is enough. How much is enough? More attention is always a good idea, that but you don't have infinite resources. So how much is the sort of minimum amount, and how much is the minimum amount to drive a long-term memory? So that's what the study is really about. And within that, different media work differently. But one of the first questions we asked is, can you drive long-term memories at all using these interesting digital formats? We all know that TV works, but do these other formats work? And the answer is resoundingly yes. It is possible. It's also possible to screw it up. It's not a guarantee, but it is possible to build a brand using innovative digital formats, and that means that we have the opportunity to do it. We just have to take that opportunity.
The results demonstrate that actually it's really challenging linear TV in terms of the performance that it can deliver. Can you share any of more of the specifics around some of the results?
So we benchmarked everything against old-fashioned linear TV, and the first thing to say about that is old-fashioned linear TV is pretty good. That's how Kraft became such an enormous company, by buying lots of attention on. So this is in no way to dink linear TV. It's just to show that at the same time you can get very similar results from other media if you get it right. We as an industry have grown up understanding how to make 30-second TV ads over the last 50 or 60 years, something we know how to do. And over there, in the Palais, they're handing out gongs for an art form that we have sort of well understood. With digital video, the rules are slightly different, and so you can achieve that, but you have to play by the new rules, which we'll be talking about in point 3 and 4 there. And you have to read the report, which is on the Dentsu website, because some people didn't do very well, and some people did very, very well.
Who did very well?
We anonymised who did very well, but I would say you are sitting on the Teads boat. So make of that what you will.
Yeah, and I think, in the same way that Les was talking about the long and the short of it, it's very much about the and when you come to TV and digital video as well. So it's not about one versus the other. But there are some different rules of the games and sort of from content creation, Karen. I don't know if you've seen some of those challenges as you move from one to another.
Absolutely. And I think going back to Mike's point, the challenge is as you move into the digital arena, the same piece of content has to be adapted. The same piece will not work by just plastering it across different channels. Think of us, we're all consumers. We have our minds are open to different aspects, whether we're watching TV. In fact, if we are watching TV, chances are we're on another device, whether it's our phone or an iPad or whatever. So I think the beauty with digital is the opportunity for personalization in that context. So I'm not surprised that Teads have done well, perhaps, in this study. Because, again, we take the example of connected TV and the opportunity to share creative across devices and follow that consumer with personalized content that opens their mind and makes them remember your message in a much easier way. And that's what we're trying to drive here.
Which is great, and also takes us to number 3 rather than number 1, but about connected TV. And what were the findings from the research around connected TV, Mike?
So what we found is that attention levels to digital media sort of quite vary from mobile, and depending on the screen size and how long the ads are. CTV operates very, very closely to linear TV norms and works in a very similar. And that's a type of advertising that we know how to make, and we should continue to carry on making. The rules about how to make a good linear TV ad, of storytelling, of showing rather than telling, of not necessarily the rational messaging, but more of the sort of emotional side of things, they apply in CTV in exactly the same way. So we should not throw away everything that we have learned over the last 75 years about how to make TV ads there. With the digital sort of more fractional formats on linear TV, but also on your mobile phone, the rules are different there. Those things are, can be in some cases a bit more like a poster. And again, we know how to make posters. We've been doing that for even longer than making TV ads, but just make a good one there. Or when it comes to personalisation and interactivity, do things that are worth engaging with. The fact that you can personalise it is one thing, but do something creative with that ability. We saw quite a lot of variation in the results there between people who are brands that took opportunities to use what was available, and then other brands that would just essentially put a TV ad into a TikTok format or whatever it might be, and you are rewarded for using the potential of the media there. If you get there's no guarantee that it will work, but if you work hard and you work with your partners. I mean, at Teads you have something called the Atelier, which will help you make a good digital ad, because it isn't something that we know, but it is worth doing that, because suddenly you can transform the power of these things.
Right. And Les, from your perspective, I guess when you started the analysis 40 years ago, there wasn't that much CTV, but what is your point of view in that?
There was none. Okay, so what struck me actually about the results was, in a way, what was not new. In a way, what came out of it for me was looking at all these different formats, thinking actually they all work quite like TV, but with different strengths and weaknesses. It's important to remember that TV was not always just good emotional brand building. It wasn't all John Lewis ads. There's the whole culture of DRTV. So we've always been able to use TV in two ways. One, to do emotional brand building. The other, to do basically a form of performance marketing. And actually, you just see the same patterns, I think, in all these video formats. So you can use modern video in these two broad ways. I think it's the long and short, I would say this, the long and short lens gives you a framework to thinking about what am I trying to achieve here, what format is most likely to do either a long or a short-term job, and what creative and media elements do we need to do those long and short-term jobs differently. So, there's one way of using video is great creative work, ads that people want to watch, that they'll stay with, so that even if they can skip it, they won't, and that you can do long-form storytelling. If people will watch an ad, if they're interested in it, they will watch it for longer than on TV. You can get people to watch for a minute or so. And that's one way of doing it. Or, as you say, you can do it almost like posters, so that as you scroll past, you get a little video sting, I guess, in fact, posters themselves now work like that, increasingly with video posters. So it just all, to me, when I saw the results, I was quite sceptical at first, by the way. When I should say I was not one of the researchers on the project. I was an independent advisor. And when I first saw this, I thought, yeah, well, this is going to be a load of bollocks, isn't it? Usual Mike Follett stuff.
He's actually quite good, to be fair, but
yeah, we're old mates. So, but when I saw the results, I just kind of went, no, this just has the ring of truth about it. So,
brilliant. And from a Kraft perspective, what are you doing with CTV and how are you approaching that?
So there's a certain sports event happening at this moment in time, and we've termed this summer our summer of sport. If you think of when the Heinz sauces are used, they're often hosting parties, watching the game. So we've partnered with Teads to help us identify across European markets our CTV plans as part of our overall marketing mix, and work with Pedro and team on tweaking from the creative atelier, the long form slow reads, to across formats, to build our plans. So we're very, very excited for this summer. I'm almost as excited for England, but I think I know the results. So I'm more confident on our Heinz plans than I am the England plans. But anyway.
And this has absolutely nothing to do with the research, but when you're talking about the summer of sports, you've done a quite interesting little joint venture with another company.
We have, and when Les talks about that connectivity to consumers, we announced a few weeks ago, and shout out again to the team for super smart and clear creativity. We've partnered with Heineken because we realise when people watch a game, they have a beer and they have a burger and they need sauce. So it's a 5+1, 5 bottles of beer, 1 bottle of Heinz, and it's a match worth waiting for.
Sounds fantastic. I just hope that people haven't picked the wrong one to down in one, because that would be a bit of a bad experience. But actually, talking about Heineken, you've been doing some really interesting stuff on CTV, on Heineken with us as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I just want to say you are like the perfect client. You're doing everything perfectly.
Be the perfect agency.
Aren't we?
Always.
So I think the challenge I think we still face actually is that a lot of clients aren't considering connected TV or digital video as just part of their planning suite, and it is still primarily in the test and learn agenda. And I think the results that Mike was talking about speak for themselves, that actually it really has become quite mainstream CTV. I think the results were as very close to linear TV in terms of brand uplift over a 2-year period. So we need to be sort of engineering across all platforms now. And Heineken, obviously, we're building a test and learn agenda. Really wanted to saw the results, wanted to test it out. So they did a home screen, CTV home screen placement with yourselves. Really distinctive, personalised environment where they could really had the opportunity to create real attention in a native environment with their consumers. And I think the results were absolutely stunning. So, I mean, obviously the anticipation was, well, we hoped it would work. It did work. And it outperformed similar stuff that we were doing with YouTube. There was, I think, about a 2.3% ad awareness uplift. And there was 2 times brand uplift when using that format as part of an omni-channel plan. And there were some learnings around the creative as well, actually. So, I mean, obviously these were specific to Heineken, but when you do these test and learn agendas, then you can start to codify those learnings for your own client, but then also for the other clients that you work with in the agency. And so I think it was sort of between 10 to 15 seconds was really the most effective. That worked better than shorter formats. And I think it's also interesting as well around the attention in terms of that sort of voluntary attention. And it can be a skippable ad, it can be a non-skippable ad, it can be in varying different formats. But if it draws your audience in, and so the creative and the message is really super important.
Which brings us nicely onto the whole forced versus non-forced view. Yeah. Les, what are your views, A, of this research, but more in general about a forced view versus a non-forced view?
Yeah, well, as I say, the research I think is really interesting, and coming from a position of initial skepticism, I'm very impressed by it. The skippable, non-skippable thing I think is quite interesting. There are these 2 broad ways you can use video. You can put it out there and force people to be exposed to it. And I mean, one of the interesting things is that even if people aren't looking at the screen, that you can have a long-term sales effect on a single exposure just through the audio, which I think is fascinating. So there's that way of doing things. The other way of doing things is you allow people, you get voluntary attention. You pull people in with great creative work, stuff that people just want to watch, that they find entertaining and interesting. And that's a much harder job, but actually that's in the long run twice as effective. And you can use it both ways. And again, going back to the long and the short of it, if you want to do long-term brand building, make great creative work that people want to watch. Make the equivalent of a John Lewis ad. I mean, we actually used to run the John Lewis ads online, and people would watch them for 2 minutes. That's one way of doing things. And then the other way of doing things is you have these little non-skippable stings, which in some ways may be, a bit more like radio ads or posters online, and that can do the short-term activation. It all just feels right.
I think this thing about the language we're using here about voluntary and involuntary attention. We asked people, of these 40,000 people, some people were asked to watch TV and they had sort of interruptive ads, and you can't skip a TV ad, and and we'd call that sort of forced viewing. Of course, it's not forced viewing because people look down at their phones, or when they're waiting for the ad to load. It's amazing that people will literally do anything but look at the ads sometimes, look at the comments or something. So even forced viewing doesn't mean that people actually look at it. But unforced or voluntary stuff is often in feed or reading an article and the ad sort of pops up and you have a choice. You can skip past it or you can... If you choose to engage, if you volunteer your attention, we call that voluntary attention. And obviously Teads, many of their formats, you do have some forced viewing but from CTV, but a lot of the formats here are give people the opportunity to engage or not. But if people do engage, then as Les is saying, the memorization effects, as you might expect, are much, much better. If people give their attention rather than you steal it from them, they're going to remember things.
Literally double.
Yeah, literally double. Now, this shouldn't have taken 40,000 people for us to prove.
Or 40 years.
Or 40 years' work. The fact that people, if you do something that people want to watch, they're more likely to remember that than if you do something dull that they don't want to watch. But that's just how I make my living. This is important. So what's the big learning here for the people in this room? Well, I think there's two things. One is buy media that gives people the opportunity to engage. That is, I think, is an important thing. The media itself can, in the right context, when people are scrolling in the right way, can give people the opportunity and at the right moment to sort of donate some attention to you. So the media is very, very important. But the second thing, and again, I just want to say this because lots of you will be media buyers here, is that the creative can double and treble and quadruple the value of your media. Often we think of the creative stuff as the icing on the cake. But if we realise that people don't have to look at this stuff, but when they do want to look at it, it works, then spending money to make your creative work harder is a really good bargain. And the final thing about this is, let's just do some sort of maths here. You might spend £1 million on a campaign, and you might spend, let's say, 100,000 on the ads. If you spend 150,000 making the ads there, you might get the equivalent of 2 million quid's worth of media. It's that multiplier effect that we're talking about. We've got the economics of making the creative all wrong. We should see creative as a amplifier and a doubler of the media spend rather than a cost to the business.
And you go.
And I think there's a rhetoric recently of, let's not worry about, the creative quality. Let's just accept that people aren't going to pay attention to the ads. We're in this low attention world where you just want people to glance at it for a couple of seconds. So, the lots of littles approach, which is basically make cheap creative, spam people with it, stuff that people don't want to watch, but we can force them to look at it for a second or so. A tsunami of cheap shit that just basically annoys the hell out of people, but if we spam them enough, we'll get a little bit of attention and we'll get a few sales. I mean, for a start, what your data shows is that is not
it's a bad business strategy.
Not good business strategy. It's not the way to make the big money. But it also leads us into a horrible world where basically people like us are basically just producing a form of noise pollution. It doesn't make sense creatively, economically, socially.
It's almost like having a panel with a bloody great drill next to you, but it's but coming back to, and Karen, you know it well because we've talked a lot of times about, you know, the fact that a brilliant creative can save a poor media plan, but a brilliant media plan can't save poor creative, and which sort of reinforces a bit from a brand side. What are you doing at Kraft? Because it's not easy. I mean, making good creative is not easy. What are the kinds of things you are doing to try and make sure, and we're seeing it in your results, that you're raising the bar in creativity?
So we do have a few things. So one, we celebrate our teams by coming here and submitting our work that gets global recognition. So we know this is the creme de la creme of creative excellence. So that's one. But internally, we set very clear standards of what will and won't work in the market. We don't just put anything the team develops out there. We have rigorous internal reviews. We also, for bigger campaigns, bring external experts in. And on top, on an annual basis, we celebrate internally all of the creative work across all of our brands to showcase the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it's a constant learning cycle and celebrating the great work out there. So whilst there is a small representation of the team here, there's a huge army back across the markets learning as we are on great successes, and on top, keeping externally focused. Who's doing a great job out there at the moment, and what can we learn from them? So.
And what about the role of pre-testing in this area? Because one of the things, given how much money is spent on the media side of it once you've built that, you know, I always used to talk about, you know, if you're going to jump out of a plane, surely you want to know that you've got a parachute on your back before you jump, and you probably want to know that parachute's likely to open before you do it. And whilst nothing can be 100% guaranteed, in this, especially in this digital world, there's so many opportunities to pre-test stuff before you actually go and spend the money.
So where we, and in particular, where we've got big campaigns, we always pre-test. So we can pre-test from an idea stage to developed creative. We have very clear standards set across markets for what is that top quartile of excellent. Otherwise, it's not worth sharing it, to Les and Mike's point. And we do a lot of pre-testing, and in fact, we're picking up an award later on today for some of our work. Another one with Kantar.
Is anyone else getting any awards this year?
But again, this is back down to understanding the consumer insight, the business problem we're solving for, and how does our brand show up. And you know, we stick to those clear principles and use internal and our external benchmarks and do a lot of testing.
And so from the bit that you were talking, Mike, which had, you make sure that you're investing enough to make great content. The end bit is also making sure that you're putting in places that people not only see it, but attentively see it.
Yeah.
That must be quite a challenge for you, Anna, from an agency perspective, when either your clients are going, I want the best possible, highly attentive places, but I want it at the cheapest possible price. How do you overcome some of those challenges and take them on that attention journey?
God, if we could overcome that, I'd be a millionaire, I think. But I mean, I think you've just highlighted still one of the biggest challenges, again, in our industry, there's multiple, of course, is that we get very quickly, when we're working on briefs with clients, we get very quickly to tactics, channels, desired outcomes. And so that automatically then takes you down a kind of predefined route, and that's very difficult to then come back from. And so what we really need to be having a discussion with the client really early on is, you know, what is the desired brand business outcome that we're trying to solve for? And then we'll start to engineer a growth system that solves for that, that challenge. And part of that will be the solutions that we're talking about today. And then I think the other thing that I still am experiencing is that there's still quite a lot of disintermediation between who does media and who does creative. technologies and helping us kind of bring that all together. And obviously the solutions you have do that brilliantly because you bring brand and performance together, creative capability and measurement all in one lovely package. But that's not the case everywhere. And so that's where we spend a lot of our time, really, kind of pushing back, trying to have those conversations, trying to make those shifts. And where there is a little bit of resistance, then that is where we do the things like we do with Heineken. Not saying that we were resistant at all, but where we do the test and learn. So let's go out, let's do it, let's prove it works, let's codify it, and then let's scale that out across existing clients and other clients.
And I think what's great about what Anna shares is when you learn as an organization, you've just raised the capability benchmark. So it's super important to test and learn because not only does the output get stronger, but the quality and skill sets of the organization builds as well.
Yeah. And I think, sorry, just if I may, I think, as I said at the beginning, we are still chasing, and it's difficult for clients, really difficult for clients. So, applaud your bravery and how you've got all of your leadership on board. But it is difficult for clients to make those decisions when they are under such big commercial pressures. So I think, having this study, having the results that truly speak for themselves, having that test and learn agenda means that we absolutely should be going out and making that shift now.
And Les, from you.
Anyone who knows me will know that I've been quite sceptical about pre-testing for 40 years. One of the problems with pre-testing is you've got to pre-test in the right way. You've got to use the right metrics. And we do a lot of measurement of the wrong things. We do a lot of measurement of short-term responses, measuring long-term brand building ads with short-term metrics, measuring emotional creative with the transmission of rational messages. So pre-testing in itself can either be a good thing or it can be damaging, depending whether you've got the right metrics. Having said that, I do think things have got better. So we see more pre-testing based on emotions rather than just rational messages. And I would say this, but now we have pre-testing that gives us a view of how people's attention moves while watching an ad. And given that this seems to be an important predictor of short and long-term sales effects, it gives us another dimension to pre-testing. So that combination of emotional pre-testing and attention pre-testing, I think, takes us in another direction. But if you're using the wrong metrics, pre-testing can actually do damage.
But that's in everything. I mean, if you don't think about what you're trying to do,
Yeah.
and you measure the wrong stuff,
but
you're always going to get the
most
wrong
people
things.
in marketing
Do the
for
wrong
most
thing.
of the last 40 years have been measuring the wrong things.
But
Just slightly worrying.
But I think on this thing about the use of metrics in marketing, it is interesting, and again, to go back to the economic value of the creative. The point of doing the pre-testing is to make sure that you're at least getting the basics right. I don't think you could guarantee you'd win something at Cannes with that, but you'd make sure that you're not doing making a dog of an ad, and also training the organisation about what the basic minimums are. The audience for the pre-testing is often your own internal team. I think so. That's about raising the bar there. But I think it is interesting that as an industry we perhaps do obsess about the wrong metrics. Cannes has become a plumbing conference. We're an industry that's been taken over by people talking about the pipes and not what's going in the pipes or where the pipes are going. And we think about ROI, an efficiency measure, which is essentially like how good is your pipe at getting this and the leakage away from it and stuff. And it's like, this conference is not actually the biggest in Cannes. The really big one is called MIPIM, which is a big construction conference where the real corruption happens. The big concrete manufacturers and stuff like that. This is the leftover from April here. Yeah. But it's as if the construction industry didn't care about foundations and buildings. It had been taken over by big plumbing. And your skyscrapers, the thing to be obsessed about was with the pipes within them. That's what's happened to our industry. The efficiency bit has taken over. And all these yachts here are all essentially plumbing companies, apart from this one. And I think that's really important because we should, the metrics that we should really care about marketing are long-term and short-term memorization, and more importantly, long-term and short-term profit. Not even sales, but profit. And you get profit by creating memories that last a long time. And then you have a famous slide about this, Les, don't you? About how advertising actually works. Now, within that, I just say again, you have to buy media that people are going to notice. That does not mean that has to be TV or cinema. You can buy media on phones that people want to engage with. Media is bloody important, and you've got to think. Hopefully, you're going to talk about go big or go home in a second. But you have to buy big enough media and enough weight to actually get noticed. And then the next thing is you have to put something in those boxes that's worth saying, because by making the creative good, you can double, triple, quadruple the value of those boxes that you're buying.
Can I just say, actually, there is another kind of mistake. So there's the kind of let's just focus on the plumbing. Get the plumbing working really efficiently, and then use it to fire hose people with shit.
That's very efficient. This analogy is going out of control.
I'm taking it up and running it with it. And that is kind of what there's one half of the industry is doing. Going, it doesn't matter if the ads are shit. Just fire hose people with. There is the other one, which is, let's make gorgeous creative and not worry about whether anyone sees it. And there's a fair bit of that at Cannes, isn't there? Always has been. Somebody, I think, was it Mark Pritchard said about building cathedrals in the desert, making glorious creative work, which is intended to win in the Palais, and we don't care if nobody ever saw it. The plumbing doesn't matter. It's both. It's budget, it's media, it's creative. And actually, the other thing we haven't talked about enough is context. So how people process ads depends a lot on when and where they see them. When and where physically in the environment or digitally in the environment, but also where they are in their lives. So we talked earlier on about posters. And there is this assumption that posters work with, fractional short exposure, and it's a reminder of the brand, and you just, you're around a lot. But there is another way of using posters, which is, for example, cross-track posters on a tube station or a railway station, where someone, they're going to be there for 7 minutes waiting for their train, they're bored out of their mind, and you can do long copy. So it's the same medium in a different environment. Probably you can see where I'm going with this, with Teads, which is when people are processing something in a slow scroll, high quality, high attention environment, you will get a different kind of attention as opposed to when they're scrolling past an endless stream of, for example, say on Twitter or something. That's a very, very different kind of attention. So I think and context is massively under-researched. There has been, over my 40 years, I've seen a few bits of research, but it feels like it's the other thing we forget about. And as I say, two kinds of context, where the ad is, but also where people are in their lives when they see it, what state of mind they're in. I think that's kind of like another frontier for research. Go and do it.
Right, so we'll move away from your future research and come back to the existing research. But I think one of the things I think is sometimes forgotten is why are we advertising at all as brands? And ultimately, you advertise to drive growth. And if you're not growing, then you're a cost.
You advertise to drive profit. Actually.
Yeah, no, but growth and the profit are linked. So if you just follow that for a second. And if you're not driving growth, you become a cost. And if you're a cost, then you get cut. So it's all around driving the right. And the best way to be efficient is to halve your media budget. That is the best way to be efficient from an ROI perspective, but it drives zero growth. Whereas if you start with how do I make it as effective as possible to drive growth and profit, quite rightly, and then within that framework, how can I be as efficient as possible? It's a much more sensible starting mindset. And Karen, I know you've got some very strong views on that from an outcomes perspective.
Ooh, I do. So again, you just need to look at the Kraft Heinz history where marketing was cut for many, many years. Marketing investments, media investments were cut for many, many years. And as a result, the top line or profit was only achieved through pricing and pushing more consumers away. So what's been amazing over the past 12, 18 months or so is, one, the focus on high quality creative has not wavered. So that's great. So that's the first cornerstone. The second one is making sure the 95 and 5 plans connect, so the long and the short, and with a slowly increasing investment behind it. So we're not where we want to be, but we are taking steps every day, and that's how we've returned to growth. So we know a good quarter is not slam dunk one, but we are seeing the green shoots of share growth, not just in one category, but across categories, across markets, because we're entertaining consumers, they're emotionally connecting to a brand they love, and more consumers are seeing more of our advertising across different platforms, and engaging with them across the whole marketing mix.
Brilliant. Just want to come back to one of the things that we talked a little bit earlier about attention, and Anna, for you, given the research, given the drive for attention, how do you actually start to put that into practice from buying against attention, for example?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what I said before and what we said, forgetting about the pipes, and coming back to what business problem or brand problem we're trying to solve. Are we trying to drive saliency? Are we trying to drive meaning, brand differentiation, whatever it might be? And then we start to think about what plan do we build to solve for those problems. And obviously the role of attention against each of those metrics is going to be different: platform, formats, context, everything else. And so then we start to build that framework. And then once we have that framework and we know which channels, what formats, what type of messaging and creative we need to develop in order to generate the right level of attention, then we can actually plan specifically for that. So then it can be a combination of reach and attention metrics. Yeah.
And Mike, sorry.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about the Dentsu stuff, Dentsu, I think, are probably 2 or 3 years ahead of most other agencies there, and all the agencies.
Sorry, can you just repeat that one more time? I didn't hear it.
I think Dentsu are probably two, maybe 2.5 years ahead of because so all the big agencies use Lumen data within their planning tools to assess what they call attentive reach. Everyone does that, and that's good. So whoever your agency is, ask for the Lumen data within the planning tools, and that's very, very important. Before you spend a penny, you should be thinking about that. What's interesting about the Dentsu approach is that they've adopted this word of enough. We started by talking about how much, or you said the right level of attention. So within Dentsu planning tools, you have this concept of attention thresholds or minimum attention thresholds. How much attention do you need to drive the outcome that we think you're doing? It's only a guess. It's a prediction, but it starts to be able to say 2 seconds in this medium is pretty much worth 10 seconds in another for doing this job. And then it means that you and the planners at Dentsu, you don't end up just buying lots and lots of attention willy-nilly. I mean, I love cinema. I think it's fantastic. It does generate tons of attention. But I would not put all my money into cinema because it's a high attention media. What you need is to get the right level of attention for the right price. And I think this is it goes back to this economics thing, because at the end of the day, Karen, if Dentsu went to you and said, fantastic news, I bought all of this stuff, but it's cost 10 times more, you're a commercial organisation. You have to buy, sufficient attention. And I think that's what is inherent in this big research, is working out how much is enough. It turns out that, again, I can't go into the details because I don't want to embarrass other people, but what's interesting about the Teads platform is when it's used correctly, it generates lots of attention. But not only that, but that attention is wildly efficient. It's sort of a lot quality and quantity there, and that gets fed into the planning tools so that your planners can actually operationalize that.
Right. And for the last couple of minutes, just Les, you've rewritten not a book but a report called "Go Big and Go Home."
No, not go big and go.
Or go. No, I said.
So from
I've been writing it. It's all about the hand. You could go big and go home.
Yeah. But it was the long and the short of it. But this is
all
very
about
much the go big or go home. Yeah.
Okay, so actually, listening to Karen, you exemplify the good side of this. So I believe that we have, in the last few years, taken a really bad wrong turn in marketing, in that we've become obsessed with efficiency at the expense of effectiveness, ROI at the expense of profit and growth, precise targeting at the expense of reach, frequency at the expense of reach, little cheap assets at the expense of, great creative work that people want to watch. We've forgotten the art of creating consistent campaigns that are consistent across media and are consistent over time, and we've got into this churn out cheap and ultimately now AI generated slop and spam people with it, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't add up to anything, just fire hose people with it. And what we're seeing, so the data that we did a couple of different bits of analysis. ROI efficiency is going up, and effectiveness in terms of growth and profit going down. The first problem is that effectiveness. So we did an econometric analysis of the relationship between effectiveness and ROI and budget. Marketers think that the most important thing is ROI. We did a survey of 500 CMOs. 2 to 1, they think that ROI is the thing that drives success. And the analysis directly contradicts them. Budget and scale are 9 times more important than ROI and efficiency. The most important decision in marketing is how much to spend, and budget setting is crude and unscientific and largely left to non-marketing people. So the first thing is start spending more, or spend commensurate with your size and your ambitions. So I was interested that you said increasing spend gradually. That's the right thing to do. You need to keep spending, punching slightly above your weight to grow. And there are techniques for doing the budget setting. There's econometric modeling. There are metrics you can use. It's not being given enough attention. Well, you talked about the pipes and the creative. I mean, the single biggest thing is the scale of what you do, which is why it's called go big or go home. You need to think very hard about the budget. You need to think very hard about the overall number of exposures you're getting, the amount of reach you're getting. Marketers repeatedly, consistently underestimate how many exposures, how much reach, how much budget is needed to move the dial. And from what, I mean, I'm only hearing this story this morning, but from what Karen's saying, it's just like, tick, 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 you're doing all the right things. You need to invest at the right level. You need to go big and broad. You need to invest in brand. But what we're kind of obsessed with this kind of small thinking. Do more with less. Target more precisely. Don't waste any of the budget. It's the waste that works. And the thing that, sorry, this is a rant, but the thing that really annoys me is when big brands like Heinz will say we need to be agile and small, like we do the kind of thing, use the little tactics that little brands use because they're creative and smart and agile. Let's not waste money on big broad reach advertising. Well, bad news or good news. If you are a big brand and you think like a small brand, You become a small brand. Advertising sales ratios are 40% down since COVID. We've never recovered investment in our industry. So yes, it's the creative, yes, it's the pipes, yes, it's the context, but the single most important thing is the scale of what you do. So go big or go home.
And also, obviously, where you spend that scale. But so it brings us nicely to the end. So thank you very much for that. For those of you who haven't read the Go Big or Go Home, recommend you read it. For those of you who've got families and looking for a good Christmas game, there's a fantastic game called Go Big or Go Home, which is great if you've got kids over the age of 10, which I was trying to get. I will send to you. And I'd just like to lastly thank an amazing panel from Dentsu, Karen, Les, and Mike for giving up your time to help everyone understand a bit about this. And I wish you all the best with the rest of Cannes.